Hello and welcome back. This is ProTaleDev back with another Game Jam video. We're still looking at Soul Link, and this is the third day. What we're going to be looking at is specifically the kind of added details I've incorporated so far. I've not had as much time on day 3 as I have on day 1 and 2. However, I have managed to do quite a few things that are worth showing. So, first thing I'm going to show off is that I've added more light to the scene. So if we quickly just go to our world, and I'll just show it in here before I play it, you'll see that I've added a lot more light in around just to kind of add to the scene, make it a little bit brighter, change the lighting with the directional light a little bit more, and kind of played around with it, played around with the intensity and the look of it. I've been really focusing on the lighting. Last time what I showed is the water shader, and I've actually made a couple of changes to it, but not too much that are worth it. More so with the how much it moves, the displacement and things like that. I've also made it so that the traps do a lot more damage, so they're going to do more damage, and if you hit them, because before they weren't doing very much, if you hit them initially, you're going to take a lot more damage than staying on them. So this means that certain traps like this spinning blade will do not as much damage when they initially hit, while if it's this type of trap with the axe, which is more like a one hitter, you're only going to be stood in it and you'll leave, then it's going to do more damage. Hopefully that makes sense. I've added a few more props around, I've incorporated more things into the scene and made it a little bit more assets there, just to fill out the scene a little bit more and make it better, look a little bit more detailed. The next thing I want to talk about is the clipping on the floor. So before the floor was actually clipping a little bit with the UV, what I've actually done is something that I've done previously in other game jams. It's a little technique I've learned, is that if you have floor that's clipping into each other, the UV, then what you can actually do is lower it slightly, because the floor at the moment isn't actually controlled by, so the nav and the floor actually are controlled by this singular floor. So this floor in here is actually just for decoration. It has no collision on it, and this means I can really move it around. So what I've actually done is I've lowered some of the floors and raised some of the floors, just to add a little bit of variation in how it looks as well. I've done this, like I mentioned, in a couple of the game jams, and it works really well, and it does stop the clipping from happening. With the walls it's a little bit easier because you can just connect them, but at least with the floors you don't have to be too detailed. You get these like little markers and little openings, and I think they work in certain locations, especially for a broken down dungeon, which is what this is. So the next thing I want to talk about is all objects now have colliders. So if I click on world here, you'll see that we now have a wall that surrounds the entire environment, so you can't go out. All of the walls also have collisions because in the last video on day 2, these walls actually didn't have collisions. You could go through them. The navigation was set up, but you could actually still walk through them. And some of the navigation was a bit broken, so I fixed the navigation, re-updated it with these colliders in place on some of these walls. I've also added in little sections here where it's just blacked out positions. That way it doesn't break too much immersion. It kind of makes you zone in on the important parts, which is where the floor is. And these edges have also added these castle walls to add a little bit of details to the edges, so that you can't just see outside the map. Next thing I want to talk about is the enemy. However, I'll do that while I'm playing the game. So after everything I've just talked about, all the different lighting effects, you're now going to see what it looks like. So as you can see, we can now go around in the environment. Ooh, and there's the enemies. You can still kill them the same way, and they won't be too much effects, too much difference. But I will show, you can see immediate changes. So if I just stand where this is, you should notice my health did go down a little bit. We've actually got quite a lot of health, and that's more for testing purposes. But if I just stand here, you will see I'm taking damage. We can change that however we like. You'll see that some of our lighting is definitely different. We've got more candles, more things like that. Also, this cursor is here only for testing, just so I can point things out. I actually do have this disabled normally. But you can see the lighting is added. These wall torches are set up in different locations, and so that's that part. Now let's talk about the enemy specifically. So as you can see, these enemies are very unique. I actually got these from the Unity store for free. Again, I didn't want to work on making too many things in this game jam, if I could avoid it. So the enemies, as well as the player, will have a custom character, but there's a bunch of free ones on the Unity store that allow you to kind of use them and have their own animations. So I didn't have to do too much for these enemies, but as you can see, they're like spiders that slowly chase you down. I've added the lights onto them. I've also made it so that the animations do play correctly. They will go into idle and they do play. So I have done that code setup. For the most part, it does actually work pretty well still. So you can use these links to lock on to different things. So if I click this, you can lock on to different traps. You will take damage if these guys are hitting you, but not very much. Again, I want this to be quite long, even though it seems like it might be a bit too easy at the moment. The health will be adjusted. So yeah, you can link onto these traps and heal from them when you get hit by them. So see if I can show that. I am showing that slightly, but you do have to stand still. That's the disadvantage of these. So you can see that we can still link to crystals. If I go back to this crystal and link to it, you can still link to things like that, and you can still link to enemies and do damage. Now I believe I did show this already, the particle effect of when you're setting them on fire, but I have increased the distance. Oops, I accidentally broke the link. Let me go back. Set these on, set them on fire, and you'll see that these enemies do set on fire as well. Sometimes both of them if you can link close enough to them. So that's the enemies. The enemies are very basic. They just have a collision in them with a trigger, and once they're close enough to our player, then they'll trigger damage. The enemy damage, and it's very straightforward. Most of that's already set up. I've also implemented my own UI bars because from previous game jams, just to save a little bit of work and add into and just make it look a bit nicer. So these these enemies have their own UI bars that I've replaced the other one because they were just a bit too big and bulky. And I've done the same thing for the crystal, which also works. So if I can just show that. Try and get to over here as quickly as possible. Oh yeah, I've got plenty of time. So hopefully the health has gone down. And then what I can do is I can show that. It might be a little bit hard to see, so because they do have a lot more health. But hopefully I can show that. You will also notice that enemies are taking damage. This is something that I don't know, it initially wasn't intended, but I've left it in. And this is if an enemy is spawned from a specific crystal, they will be damaged themselves. I might change that at the moment because I think it's causing issues with taking damage for these crystals. But you'll see that these crystals now have an actual model, again, using low polygon assets that I've already used before. And for the most part that is done. So that's the enemy. Nothing too special, nothing too crazy, but it does look like a really cool model. Very impressed. Again, link in the description for that that pack. So if I quickly show the enemy again in here, oops, so I was showing before. You'll see that this is what it looks like up close. It's like a little spider, has eyes. You've got the spotlight that comes out here. You've also got the fire effect and the health UI. And that's about it for there. So the last thing I want to show you is if we are in play, you'll see that they don't spawn in initially. So this one should spawn here. There's actually 3 locations they could spawn. But if I stay here long enough, okay, very unlucky. It looks like they've spawned somewhere else. Yes, they did. So of the 3 spawns, they actually spawned somewhere else. But basically, the wave system is working now. So if these are killed, I think I've got it set to 2 enemies. Ooh, I've got set to 2 enemies at the moment. But if one of these is killed, another one will spawn and the wave will just continue. And this is the last thing I have to show you, is that the wave system is working. So if I go to my wave/crystal manager, you'll see that my crystals will spawn. There'll be one crystal that spawns in, and once that's destroyed, another crystal will spawn in. It'll go through this list of 5 crystals. You can see them here, these locations, and they all have their own wave system, increased amounts, more dangerous, smaller enemies, bigger enemies, that kind of thing. Once it goes through all those, obviously it'll spawn it at these 3 locations, so one there, and one there. And it's just a simple crystals that are associated with health. When they're here, it'll go over to these different waves, and these waves are similar. I'm not going to go into detail about the code of this because I've actually covered it in multiple games, other game jams included in those other projects, and so I don't think I need to cover it again. But basically what we've got is 2 enemies spawning, and we've chosen our enemy, which is enemy standard, and then it's a rate of 5. So you'll have another one spawn after another one after 5 seconds, so it'll be 1, then 5 seconds later it'll be another one until the number's up to that amount. The moment there's only 1 wave, just because I'm still working on it, it's only just for testing, but this most likely have about 5 waves. Once the waves are all defeated, you can just destroy the crystal however you like. However, you still have to defeat the enemies, but you can defeat the crystal early and that will stop the whole thing. So it's up to you. So that is everything I've got to cover for today. Day 4, I'm going to start working on getting the character, the player done, most likely a main menu, and finishing all of the waves, potentially adding a new enemy, and fixing all the mechanics that are not quite working. And maybe by the end of the 4th day, we should start seeing a more playable, finished product. So, this has been ProTaleDev, and I'll see you next time.